Marriage is often described as a bond built on love, trust, and respect. When two people promise to stay together, they agree to share their lives, protect each other, and keep their relationship private. For me, this bond with my wife has always been the most important part of my life. We have been married for several years, and though our life is not perfect, it is filled with love, understanding, and small joys that make every day meaningful. Like most couples, we have friends who sometimes visit or share time with us. One of them is my old friend, who recently went through a painful divorce. I kept him close because I felt sorry for him and wanted to support him during his difficult time. I never thought that his presence could bring problems into my marriage. After all, I trusted him as a friend, and I trusted my wife completely. But one evening changed everything. What started as a casual visit turned into an uncomfortable and shocking moment when my divorced friend made a suggestion that no married couple expects to hear. He told my wife that we should consider opening our marriage, as if loyalty and commitment were no longer important. His words did not just surprise us. They shook the peace and comfort we had built together. This story is about how one friend's careless idea tested the strength of our marriage, how my wife and I reacted, and what we learned about protecting the sacred space we share as husband and wife. My friend Daniel had not always been so cynical about love. Years ago, he was one of the first among us to get married. He had fallen in love quickly and at the time seemed completely devoted to his wife. For a while, their marriage looked happy. They traveled together, posted smiling pictures on social media, and often spoke about building a future. But over time, cracks began to show. Arguments became more frequent, and Daniel would often complain about how marriage felt like a cage. His wife accused him of being careless and selfish, while he argued that she was too controlling. The more they fought, the more distant they became. Rumors spread among friends that there had been betrayal on both sides. Some said his wife had been unfaithful, while others believed Daniel himself had grown too close to other women. Whatever the full truth was, their marriage ended in a bitter divorce. Daniel walked away from it angry, hurt, and completely disillusioned about the idea of lifelong commitment. Since then, his views on relationships changed completely. He began to speak openly about how monogamy was unnatural and how people should have the freedom to explore different partners without guilt. He read books and articles about open marriages and modern love, repeating these ideas in conversations. To him, loyalty no longer mattered. What mattered was personal freedom and avoiding the pain he felt in his own marriage. Even though I disagreed with his outlook, I remained his friend. We had known each other since childhood, and I felt it was my duty to stand by him, especially when he seemed lonely. My wife, being kind-hearted, also welcomed him, even when his visits became frequent. I thought his opinions were just talk, bitter words from a wounded man. What I did not realize was that his bitterness would soon cross a line and threaten to disturb the peace of my own marriage. It was a Saturday evening, and my wife and I had invited Daniel over for dinner. We hadn't seen him in a while, and it was one of those nights when everything felt perfect, comfortable, relaxed, and full of laughter. My wife had cooked one of our favorite meals, and the wine was flowing. We talked about everything: work, movies, travel plans, and even some funny memories from our childhood. For a while, it felt like old times. But then, as the conversation drifted to relationships, Daniel took a strange turn. He had always been opinionated, but tonight he seemed more intense than usual. My wife and I were sharing a story about a couple we knew who were going through a tough time in their marriage. It was a typical discussion, sympathetic, thoughtful, but then Daniel leaned forward, a serious look in his eyes, and said something I will never forget. He began, relationships like that, where people are stuck in these monogamous marriages, they can only go so far. There's too much pressure. People are too focused on being loyal to just one person, when really, that's unnatural. My wife and I both looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? I asked, unsure where this was going. Daniel paused for a moment, almost as if he was trying to gather his thoughts before he spoke again. Well, you guys are a great couple. You seem happy, but it's kind of unrealistic, don't you think? Holding on to the same person forever, only being with them. Why not open things up? You should try exploring other connections outside of your marriage. It could make things more exciting, more real. His words hung in the air, like a cold breeze that came out of nowhere. My wife's face went pale. I, on the other hand, was speechless. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The suggestion felt like a punch to the gut, but I tried to stay calm, unsure of how to respond. "You want us to open our marriage?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Daniel nodded, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Exactly. You could keep the love and connection, but at the same time, explore other experiences. You know, meet other people, have fun. You don't have to be so tied down. People evolve and their needs change." There was a long, awkward silence. My wife didn't say a word, but I could tell from the look in her eyes that she was shocked, confused, and hurt. It was as if a dark cloud had suddenly appeared over the evening we had been enjoying. "I'm not sure that's something we believe in," I said, my voice firm, though I could feel my heart racing. Daniel quickly backpedaled. "I'm just saying, it's something to think about. Look, I'm not trying to make you do anything. It's just a suggestion. But I've seen how freeing it can be. You don't have to do everything the way society tells you to." My wife finally spoke, her voice shaky. "We're not interested in that, Daniel. Our marriage works because of the trust we have with each other. We don't need to open it up to anyone else to be happy." There was an uncomfortable pause. Daniel didn't press the issue further, but the damage had already been done. His words had planted a seed of confusion, even doubt. It was like someone had dropped a pebble into calm water, and now the ripples were spreading through my mind and my wife's heart. We changed the subject, but the evening had already taken a turn. Dinner felt heavier, the conversation awkward, and I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. After Daniel left, my wife and I exchanged only a few words. She was clearly upset, but neither of us knew exactly how to address what had just happened. It was more than just a strange suggestion. It was a challenge to everything we had built together. Even after our conversation that night, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. My wife seemed okay, at least on the surface, but I could tell that the suggestion had shaken her more than she let on. She wasn't the type to let things bother her for long, but this was different. It wasn't just a passing comment. It was a challenge to everything we'd built together. As for me, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. I had known him for years, shared everything with him, my hopes, my struggles, even my deepest fears. But the suggestion he made felt like a betrayal, a breach of trust. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How dare he suggest something so outlandish to my wife? How could he think that was okay? I spent the next few days wrestling with my emotions. On one hand, I was furious with him for planting that seed in my wife's mind. On the other, I couldn't ignore the part of me that felt sorry for him. His life was a mess. His marriage had ended painfully, and now he was living with a bitterness that made him believe relationships couldn't last. He was a man who had lost faith in love, and I could understand how that might make him think everyone else should follow suit. But just because I understood why he was struggling didn't mean I had to agree with him. My wife and I had built something special, a bond based on trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. I couldn't just throw that away, no matter what Daniel said. I also couldn't ignore the doubt that had crept into my mind. Was Daniel right in some ways? Was it possible that I was too rigid in my beliefs? Were my feelings for my wife natural? Or was I just clinging to an old-fashioned idea of love? I tried to push those thoughts aside, but they lingered, pulling at the edges of my thoughts. The hardest part wasn't the anger I felt towards Daniel. It was a fear that the suggestion had planted doubt in my wife's mind. What if she started questioning our relationship, wondering if she was missing out on something? What if she, too, started to believe that exploring other relationships might make us stronger? I had to talk to her again, but this time I wanted to be sure of my own feelings. I couldn't afford to be uncertain, not when it came to my marriage. I spent hours reflecting on what mattered most to me, what mattered to us. I knew that no matter how tempting the idea of change might seem, it was not worth risking the love we shared. Eventually, I came to a decision. I wasn't going to let my marriage fall apart over one suggestion, no matter how shocking or unconventional it was. My wife and I had built a life together, and it was one I wasn't ready to throw away. The question now wasn't about whether I could forgive Daniel. It was about how I would protect my marriage from the damage he had caused. After that conversation with Daniel, things slowly began to settle. I didn't expect everything to go back to normal overnight, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just the apology I had wanted from him. It was a reassurance that he finally understood where I was coming from. I also felt an undeniable shift in myself. I had made it clear that my marriage was my priority, and I wasn't willing to let anyone, not even a longtime friend, interfere with that. At home, I took extra care to reinforce this sense of security with my wife. We spoke more openly about the situation, about how our feelings had been affected by Daniel's suggestion, and how we both felt about it moving forward. I reassured her that no matter what, I was 100% committed to her, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would change that. She smiled, her eyes soft with gratitude. "I never doubted you," she said quietly. But hearing someone else suggest that we change what we have, it made me question things. I didn't know if you would take it seriously, or if maybe you consider it. "I would never," I replied immediately. "This marriage is ours, and it's built on trust. You're the only one I want, and I want our future to be about just us." We held each other for a long moment, the quiet, reaffirming the love we shared. It felt like a renewed sense of connection, a reminder that, even in times of doubt, we were stronger together. As for Daniel, we didn't completely distance ourselves, but we made it clear that some boundaries had to be respected. I didn't want to lose him as a friend, but I knew I couldn't let him project his fears and bitterness onto our lives anymore. He had to understand that while I would always be there for him, I wouldn't stand by silently when it came to my marriage. A few weeks later, Daniel reached out to apologize again. This time, it was over text, and while it wasn't as deep as the conversation we had at the cafe, it was heartfelt. "I'm sorry for everything," he wrote. "I respect your marriage, and I'll never bring that up again." I appreciated the message, but I knew that the road to healing for him was still long. I was glad he recognized the importance of boundaries, but I also knew that he had a lot more to work through before he would truly find peace in his own life. As for my wife and me, we were stronger than before. We had faced a test, and we had come out of it with an even deeper sense of trust and understanding. What we had built together was precious, and no one, not even a friend, could change that. In the end, the suggestion Daniel made was a wake-up call, one that forced both my wife and me to confront what we truly valued in our marriage. It wasn't just about defending our relationship against a friend's idea. It was about reaffirming the trust, commitment, and love that had been the foundation of our bond for so many years. What I realized through all of this is that relationships, especially marriage, are fragile in some ways. They require constant care, attention, and respect. Even the smallest outside influence, whether from a friend, a family member, or society, can shake the trust that two people have built together. But the strength of a relationship doesn't come from avoiding challenges. It comes from facing them head-on and reaffirming why the bond exists in the first place. I also learned that sometimes, even the people closest to us may not understand the depth of our commitment to one another. Daniel's suggestion wasn't born out of malice, but from his own brokenness and confusion. It wasn't about our marriage. It was about his inability to hold on to love after his own experiences. In the end, it taught me that compassion is important, but so is setting clear boundaries. My wife and I came out of this stronger, more united. We realized that marriage isn't just about avoiding difficulties. It's about growing through them together. We had made our vows, and we would stick to them, not because we were perfect, but because we were committed to building something real. No outside suggestion, no matter how well-intentioned, could take that away. And as for Daniel, I hope one day he finds a peace he's searching for. But for now, I know my focus will always be on the life I built with the woman I love.